If you want to develop a personal relationship with the divine, you need devotion. Without devotion, spirituality quickly becomes arid, stale, and dry. But true devotion brings sweetness, love, and true fulfillment to your spiritual practice. In this episode, we break down the many ways in which devotion enhances the spiritual awakening experience and how it ultimately paves the way to surrender and realization. My name is Abhinava, and this is Spirit Matters, a podcast helping modern seekers integrate their spiritual awakening experience into their daily lives. Me and my co-host Vajan are meditation teachers with over 25 years of experience, walking the path of love, devotion, and surrender as taught by our teacher Sri Chinmoy. And every week, we discuss a new spirituality challenge. Stay tuned every week for more episodes. Now let's dive in. Today we are going to speak about devotion. And we are on a spiritual path, you could say, where devotion plays a big part. Our teacher Sri Chinmoy called this the path of love, devotion, and surrender. And I guess when we look at the Hindu tradition, and if we look at the Mahabharata and particularly the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna explains the three major paths that lead to the divine, he talks about the path of karma yoga, the path of selfless action, the path of jnana yoga, or the path of wisdom and discernment, and the path of bhakti yoga, or the path of devotion. And I think it is implied there that he feels that the path of bhakti was the fastest or easiest path that leads to the divine. So it's a very powerful quality. And what, in your estimate, is devotion?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, taking that foundation that Sri Chinmoy, for a long time, that was the main way he would explain his path. He would talk about the path of love, devotion, and surrender. And when I think about what devotion is, I don't see it as something separate from love and surrender. I see it, there's like a continuum, and it starts with the experience of love, feeling the love for the creation, feeling the love from the creator coming to you, feeling the love that permeates all of existence. And through experiencing and embodying that love, naturally then devotion starts to form within the individual. So it's like a continuum. You start at one point or one end of it with the experience of love. And that love, because in some ways I like to feel that devotion is love in action in your life. It's the practice of love. It's how you actually play out the experience of love on a day-to-day basis. In your daily life is by being devoted to something, somebody, to an idea, to an organization, to a spiritual tradition, whatever it is. That devotion is the acting out or the practicing of love. And then at some point, as you delve deeper and deeper and deeper into that devotion, you start to reach towards the other end of the spectrum, or the other end of the continuum, which is the experience of surrendering yourself and letting go of the small self to step into something far greater. It's the experience of letting go of being the drop and becoming the ocean. So when I think of it like that, it just seems like this beautiful journey where we start with love, we grow into devotion, and then we finally end the journey in surrender. And so to me, they're not three separate states. They're a continuation of the same energy as we go deeper and deeper or higher and higher into the experience.
Yes, I think in that sense, devotion is a form of intensified love. It's like, and surrender is an even more intensified form of love, you could say. And I think devotion is always, well, you can distinguish devotion between the human devotion and the divine devotion. So when we speak about devotion in a human way, I think we're often talking about attachment. And Sri Chinmoy has talked about this as well. He said that human devotion is actually nothing short of attachment. And I think it's really good to distinguish devotion from attachment, because devotion can also seem like an attachment. If you're really devoted even to a divine cause, some people may say, oh, you're just attached. And what would be the difference, you think?
Well, really the big difference, I believe, between attachment and devotion is the expectation that you take into it. It's the expectation that you carry with you. And in attachment, you're always wanting a particular outcome from the organization or the person or the group that you feel attached to. You're always wanting something from them. So there's this expectation to get a particular type of result or reward for your actions. Whereas when you get to true devotion, Devotion is completely free from that sense of expectation. Your devotion itself is giving you the fulfillment. The devotion to the ideal and to the divine that gives you everything you need. You don't expect anything in return, but it's simply the unconditional nature of it that it gives you everything that you need without you having to push or pull or have any expectations. So that would be my
Yeah, I
explanation.
agree with that. And I think for that, what is necessary is also a sense of oneness, because if there is still a
Mm.
sense of separativity between you and the divine, I think there always will be some sense of expectation. So if you pray for the divine for either peace or perhaps even something to happen in your life, something good, or some material wealth or a spiritual quality, in prayer, there's a very subtle form of expectation. But if there's real devotion, like you said, there is no expectation. It's only offering. You only want to offer everything you have, everything you are to the divine. And of course, I think that only can come about if you feel this complete oneness, this drop falling into the ocean, becoming one with the ocean. And of course, then there is no expectation because it's basically you. You could say the smaller you um, interacting with the bigger you, with your true higher self. But it's all the same self. It's all in the same ocean. It's taking place in the same shared consciousness from human and divine. It's a wonderful feeling of being lifted up into this higher consciousness. And I think that's the essence of why we practice spirituality, is to feel that we are lifted up into this higher sense of oneness and divine consciousness, which feels so fulfilling and so rewarding. And you know that the divine, that God or the supreme is taking care of you. And you don't need to expect anything, because there's, I think, a deep wisdom or deep knowledge that comes with that devotion, that you know that God will supply you with everything you need. And so I remember that Sri Ramakrishna used to almost joke with, he was he was a devotee of Mother Kali. That was his god, the mother aspect of the divine. And he used to almost joke with Mother Kali and said, why am I even praying to you? I know that you fulfill everything, but yet you want me to pray to you. I don't understand. I don't understand this. He was almost seeing the joke as it played out,
Yeah.
this joke of devotion and still having to pray to the divine, even though you know that divine knows everything that you need and will supply it in due time.
Yeah, I've actually got something from Sri Chinmoy where he talks about devotion here. And I'll just read it out. And it says, devotion is our soul's fearless quality. Devotion does not mean begging from someone. Devotion means dedicated service to the divine child in us. It means intensity, the intensity that makes us feel one. Devotion means entering into the superior part of one's own existence. Devotion is the sweetest feeling in us, the feeling of oneness with something higher and deeper in us. It is the most intimate connection with our better self, purer self, higher, nobler, and deeper self. It is the sweetest awareness of truth. And I really like that because that touches on what you were saying. Like, it's the sweeter than the sweetest feeling, this quality of devotion. But it's also beautiful where Sri Chinmoy is saying we're devoting ourselves, the feeling of oneness, with the highest and deepest part of ourselves, because
Yeah.
this is the part that people really struggle with in the Western world. And I think Sri Chinmoy himself saw this, that he felt that in the East it was much easier for people to practice devotion because they'd grown up in a very devotional culture where praying to deities and the divine was very much a part of people's day-to-day life, and like a very beautiful outpourings of love and devotion was a commonplace experience. And most people haven't experienced that in the Western world because our conception of God has been much more of a judge, and so there hasn't been this very loving and devotional and reverential outpouring of emotion towards the divine seen in our lives. And so most people in the West, if they see that, they feel as though that the worship is always something external to ourselves. We're worshiping something outside of ourselves. But the beautiful realization you have as you really dive into a true spiritual tradition is that you're not connecting with something outside of yourself. You're connecting with your own higher self. The most divine part within you is the divine consciousness that you're looking for. And so although at times we may posit it outside of ourselves, we may see some divine quality in Mother Nature, or we may see some divine qualities in a teacher, they're just reminding us of all of the divinity that actually exists within us, and that is truly our highest part of our being. And Sri Chinmoy talked about that really nicely as well, that at some point we will realize that our highest part and his highest part is actually the same awareness. It's the same consciousness. And so to start with, we might see it much more easily in someone like himself who has actually attained and is living out that reality on a day-to-day basis. But at some point, we'll realize that our own highest self, and we'll see that there's no separation between the highest in us and the highest in him. And so that's a really beautiful thing, because then you start your spiritual journey becomes a journey back to yourself, back to your truest height or your deepest depths. And so it's something uniquely personal. It's a uniquely personal journey back to the self. And I think people in the West, if they could understand that more, I think far more people would be much more open to spirituality, because I think there's always this reticence and fear of putting faith in something outside of ourselves. But true spirituality, the truest faith is always in the divine, which we know resides within us.
And I think also devotion needs a personal aspect. And that is again, something that the East is, and especially India, is really good at having a personal or an image of God as a personal God. And so we have the image of Krishna or Mother Kali, or the deities that are beautiful depictions of them. And in the Indian temples, you see so many beautiful decorations and gods and goddesses. And yeah, it's this really beautiful way of approaching the divine as almost as another human, of course, as a divine personality. But devotion needs that. I think it's really hard to devote yourself just to an abstract thing, God as the infinite light or the infinite consciousness. How can you have real devotion to that? There's, like you said, devotion is always filled with sweetness. This is one of the main aspects of devotion. It feels very sweet. And so if you have this beautiful personal relationship with the divine as another person, as your friend or your father. I mean, in the Christian world, they talk about God the Father, and they definitely see, Jesus as you could say, a personal aspect of the divine, in that sense, that you can have real devotion to Jesus in that way, to your spiritual master, your guru, or to the mother aspect of the divine. But devotion, I think, needs that personal aspect, don't you think?
I do. And I know you told me a funny story about a musician from the 1970s who makes some wonderful Vishnu-infused 70s
Oh,
rock.
yes.
And how he got inspired and captured by the idea of devotion. Can you tell that story again? Because I find it
yes. Well,
interesting.
his name is Michael Cassidy, and he had the group Golden Avatar in the 70s, and he worked with really great musicians. And I think George Harrison produced his first album, but he was not he was not part of the ISKCON movement, the Hare Krishna movement, but he was in contact with them, and he had actually contact with their guru, Prabhupada, was the spiritual teacher of the Krishna movement. But I think somebody once showed him, he went to a Hare Krishna meeting or something, and somebody showed him a book with pictures, and he said, "This is God, and this is his girlfriend," and it was Krishna and Radha, and he was like, "Wow, that is so simple and so beautiful. I can subscribe to that." And then exactly, and that's kind of how he got hooked and how he got inspired.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful because there's something about love and devotion that is so deep inside human beings that it's so fundamental to everything in our world, to how families operate, to how couples operate, to how, life itself continues on. So it's so deeply ingrained into the being that if we can find a way to see those same forces, but see them instead of being just purely trapped here in the physical world, to see them as a transcendent reality as well, and to see them divinized, and to see them acted out in the highest possible way. And when we see that, and I think like the story of Krishna and Radha is the world's most beloved love story. Like there's millions, hundreds of millions of people who just love that story. And the little cute vignettes and little anecdotes and little experiences that happen all along the way. And because they see it's the divine and his Shakti, it's the masculine and the feminine versions of the same energy, but the way that they're playing and intertwining, people just love that. And so I think there's something really, really nice about being able to have that experience and to make that love, instead of it something limiting and binding that keeps us trapped here in the physicality, in the materialism of the world, and can so easily fall into a battle of wills and egos, which is such a tragedy, because very often you see people come together and there's, in the beginning, there's this beautiful spirit of love. And then 10 or 20 years down the track, it's just completely, they're at each other's throat. And it's like such a tragedy to see something that started off with such beautiful intentions, and how the material world and our lack of purity and our lack of wisdom ends up just strangling something that started off with such a beautiful
I know the
intention.
world has a tendency to. It's like the law of entropy. Like everything just
Yeah.
deteriorates. It seems in the human world. And I
Yeah.
think it was Sri Aurobindo made this comment. He said everything in the world can be divinized and transformed, and can be used for the divine. So even if it's a relationship, or if it's a job situation, or if it's whatever, a personal struggle, everything can be divinized. And so I think that's also, if we accept God as the creator of this beautiful universe and this divine Leela, this game that we're playing, then I think also the divine shows us how to do that. So that's the story of Radha and Krishna. It's like the ultimate form of divinized human love. It's no longer, ego fights and trying to one up the other one, but to have true oneness on each level. And in that way, you really raise it into the realm of divine love. And that's why devotion is so crucial, I think, even for the journey to enlightenment or realization. And Sri Chinmoy used the term God realization. That's the ultimate enlightenment, when we completely become one with God, with the divine, on every aspect of our being. So not only in the soul's world, but also our physical bodies are full of God's light, peace, and bliss. And it's an experience that the spiritual masters have all had. And that's why we revere them, and that's why we follow them, and they have this great wisdom about that. But Sri Chinmoy also said that if there's no devotion, there can be no God realization. So it's an actual crucial aspect of the journey to the divine. And it's that's an interesting aspect, to feel that devotion is actually necessary to realize God.
And I think it's necessary just to be able to walk the path for the time needed to make the transformations to your nature. Because the thing is, when you're trying to transform your nature has become what it is over a very long, long period of time, through lifetimes and lifetimes. You have ended up becoming the person you are now. And so to transform that and divinize that, it's not a short-term fix. Like Sri Chinmoy would joke, it's not instant coffee. And anyone who's offering you realization as though it is instant coffee, is perhaps
It's
not
more
doing.
like it's more like the coffee that's behind you. You're in a
Yeah,
coffee shop right now in Berlin, in
yeah,
Shamaya's coffee shop, and it's this beautiful espresso brewed coffee where we really pay attention to the beans, the right grind, the right
yeah.
extraction time. We steam the milk. That's the whole process right there.
And because in people's lives, but they need to have this experience of fulfillment and the sweet feeling of connection to something. And because most people will tend to try and find that in the human world, in the relationship world, and the connection with people around them. And the problem with that is it will always at some point let you down, whether through the actions of others or through your own weaknesses and your own ignorance. You'll always find yourself in conflict or disagreement or strife. And so to walk this path for a very long period of time is what you need to do. It might be 40 or 50 years of your life that you're going to try and spend walking this path of spiritual transformation. There needs to be some sweetness and love in it. And if you do it and you feel as though that you can do it without that feeling of sweetness and love, and you can just do it with your willpower and your determination, it's an impossible task. Like you cannot stay committed to a tradition for 30 or 40 years if you don't feel some positive, some love, some devotion, some sense of sweet surrender to the guru or your
Yeah,
form of the divine?
I actually found some a writing of Sri Chinmoy. I think it's really enlightening to read this out because it speaks exactly to what you were just saying. And there was a question somebody asked Sri Chinmoy. The question is, if one has aspiration but not devotion. So aspiration is the inner cry. It's like the fuel
Mm.
of our spiritual life. So if one has aspiration but not devotion, does this hinder his spiritual progress? And Sri Chinmoy answered, if the aspirant has aspiration and not devotion for the master, in this case, he was talking about devotion to the spiritual master, who's like the embodiment of the divine for that person. He says, certainly it hinders. I must say it hinders considerably the aspirant's spiritual progress. If the aspirant does not care for a master and wants to aspire all by himself, then it is a different matter. He is not expected to show devotion to anyone. But here also I want to say that if he really aspires, then he has to feel that one day he has to reach his far distant goal through devotion. Now, in order to reach the goal, even without a guru, he still needs conscious devotion to the goal itself. And if the aspirant feels that he has no need for this devotion, then he is hopelessly mistaken. There comes a time in the spiritual life when one is bound to feel that devotion and aspiration can never be separated. Devotion is the candle, aspiration is the flame. No matter which path one follows, if his aspiration is not founded on one pointed and surrendered devotion towards his highest goal, then the realization of the ultimate truth will always remain impossible. So that's an interesting subject right there, that even if you do not have a teacher or a guru or a personified image, you still need devotion.
Yeah. So it is a fundamental fact of the game that we're playing. And
Yeah.
that's why it's so useful to actually read and be open and pay attention and listen to the great teachers. Because basically they're spelling out the rules of the game in some way. It's like if you turned up at a field and there's some people were playing a game and you didn't actually understand the rules of the game, like where the boundaries are, or how to score a point, or even what the point of the game is, you're going to be kind of confused, and you're going to be stumbling around the field trying to figure out what's happening and why people are going over there and why people are going over here. And the master makes it so clear. It's like, okay, this is the type of game we're playing, and these are the basic fundamental rules of it. That there needs to be some love for the divine. There needs to be love for the creator. And if you don't have that, you're not going to go anywhere. It's like you need that aspect. You need this aspiration. You need the devotion. You need the surrender. It's like these are fundamental rules of the game. And so, without knowing that, you could spend a lot of time just feeling like you were going to use your willpower and your concentration and your determination and just really aspire as hard as you can. And I think we've all seen that in spiritual communities where you'll get some young people who come in and they feel as though that they can just force their will upon the divine, and they're very rigid and intense, and for 5 years or 10 years they're gritting their teeth and they're really going for it in their spiritual life. And at some point, they give up because they weren't going about it in tune with the rules of the game. They didn't pay attention clearly enough to how the game is actually meant to be played. And so they were using, it was like trying to just have a flame but no candle. It's like
Exactly.
trying to keep a wick burning without having a candle is an incredibly difficult thing to do, and it's going to use all of your energy. And at some point, you're going to find that you've run out of juice, and you're going to just have to go and have a break for 20 years just to recover from the
Exactly.
experience. So it's not a sustainable way to approach the divine, and I think that's so nice to see, is that each iteration of teachers, as they came down to earth, they brought a teaching that was perfectly crafted for the time and the culture and the people that they came into contact with. And since Sri Chinmoy was really the first, one of the first great teachers that synthesized the East and the Western traditions, and because he based himself in the Western world for his, his teaching career, his teaching was very well designed and crafted for the Western world, for the modern lifestyle, for the way that we live in the world today. And so I think it's a very sustainable approach so that we actually can make part of our day-to-day life in the world and still be able to carry on our jobs and careers and do all of these things. And so I think that's we're really blessed to be living at a time, because if you try to live a really strict, sort of Buddhist monastic life, that just lived in, the modern world, and were trying to keep your job going and trying to keep your career up to date and all of these, run a business, you'll find that it's quite difficult to balance those two things while not living in a monastery. So having a way of life which is sustainable and in balance with the world around you is a real challenge, and it's a challenge that Sri Chinmoy clearly saw. And I mean, many of his students worked at the United Nations, which is a huge international organization, but its headquarters is in New York. And Sri Chinmoy saw that, okay, this is an inspiring place because this place is all about world oneness. It's about world harmony. It's about bringing together a oneness family, a oneness dream for the world. But this is still a huge organization with all of the bureaucracy and all of the problems that you have in any organization. So he saw firsthand how his students had to deal with the different comings and goings, and so he was very attuned to the types of reality that people have to live in the modern world.
Yeah, and devotion also gives a lot of well, I think it also builds character. So in our community, we have a lot of people who really express devotion. I can see in my own center, in my international community, that people who have this devotion, they have a sweetness to their character, and it's so endearing and it's so loving, and you feel so at home with these people. It's like there's no threat, there's no sharp edges. It's like devotion kind of sculpts you into this really wonderful, well-rounded individual. So I think it's also a great character building quality, apart from being, just like a real direct route to the divine.
Yeah, I like with that piece I read out earlier. Sri Chinmoy said it was a fearless quality within us.
Ah, yeah,
And so
yeah.
there's something really amazing about that, because I think the ideal there is that when you're devoted to something higher than just the material world around you, just the people and the places that you go to, your devotion is something that transcends the the ordinary world around you. And so in some ways it lifts you up above that. Like if you have something that is far more important to you than the opinion of your boss at work, or the opinions of your colleagues, or even what is considered normal, or the right way to do things, or what is considered strange or unusual, if you're devoted to something that transcends all of those things, you're not going to be so bothered by those material realities around you. You're going to be like, okay, I've got my goal and it's fixed somewhere above all of this. This is not the whole world to me. This is only a small part of my reality. And still you'll try and operate in the world, but it will make you less attached and less worried about what your colleagues think or what your people around you think, because you realize that what's important is to please the highest part of you, not to please the ordinary human characters around you. That's not the thing that's going to give you any lasting satisfaction and meaning in life. And so I think that's a wonderful thing for people to actually take on board, because so much of our time and energy gets caught up and trapped with pleasing the humans around us. And the humans around us can never truly be pleased. It doesn't matter. You see people who become real people pleasers, and they do everything in their power to try and make the people around them happy. And no matter what they do, people are still going to be dissatisfied with them. People will still criticize them, or ask them for more, or pull or push at them, trying to get satisfaction in their own way. And when you've devoted yourself to something that transcends the limitations of the human world, it's wonderful, because you can suddenly start to see the human game for the game that it is. It's a play of egos and forces, and all of these different very human experiences going on here. But your satisfaction is not based on that. It's coming from a higher place. It's coming from pleasing the highest part of yourself, and that frees you in some tremendous sense, which I think is going to be very valuable for people as they move through the world.
And yeah, and also in a very practical sense, you see your devotion also makes you see the divine in others. So it gives you the capacity to see through the ego games, to see through the exterior and perhaps the rigid qualities or the mental qualities, and perhaps the outer persona. And you can really feel and see the divine in others if you have this devotion. It really helps you connect to the divine in other people. So it's a great, I think, also socially you become much better equipped to deal with these harsher realities and still maintain your own spiritual standards, let's say, and to approach the people, in their the divine in them, and that also helps the other people to kind of recognize that. I think people find it very disarming if somebody comes to them with somebody who's really devoted, who has this devoted quality. It's a really disarming interaction, because you feel that they're not wanting anything from you. They're not wanting, they're not addressing you from the ego. There's not these sharp edges. So I think it's wonderful in that way as well. And if you look at history, when some of the great spiritual masters came down, they always came down with a lot of devotion. So if you look at Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Krishna, and you had in the 14th century, you had Sri Chaitanya. He was also called Lord Gauranga. And Chaitanya was the embodiment of devotion. So he was to identify himself with Krishna to such an extent that he became Krishna at that point. His consciousness completely merged. And he came at a time in Bengal and in India where there was a lot of really kind of dry philosophical religious debate going on. So Chaitanya himself in his younger days wrote a book on logic, which was a really brilliant book. He was a very brilliant young man. He himself had really highly developed mental faculties. But then when he realized God, when he reached his enlightenment, he completely transformed into this just devotional, being. And he would sing songs about Krishna and about the gopis and about Radha and Krishna. And he would just sing and dance in the streets of Bengal. And people would be just mesmerized, and people would join in singing, and they felt something really, really uplifting and divine. And of course, he had a lot of critics as well. People were saying he's just a madman. He's just crazy. But he transformed.
Intoxication.
Exactly. This is the divine madman, or the divinely intoxicated man. And he really transformed the culture at that time, more the religious culture. And he brought back this sense of devotion to the spiritual practices of the time. And that was really necessary. And Sri Aurobindo also said that Sri Krishna's youth in Vrindavan, when Sri Krishna was young, he was a cowherd boy, and he used to play with the gopalas and the gopis, and he used to play the flute, and people flocked to him, and they felt something really, really divine in him. And Sri Aurobindo said that his childhood was one of the main events that shaped human history to this day, because he said that by Sri Krishna's childhood created the religion of love. So this idea of God as somebody you can love as another person, as your friend, as your playmate, as your comrade, that was completely new. And that is such an important part of the game, I think, of the spiritual game, that we see God as our friend, as our lover, as our friend, as our father, as our mother. In India, they even see God as a child. They worship Krishna as the child. So there's all these different relations that you can have with the divine, and all are different aspects of love and devotion.
And it's also the highest part of yourself. So it's wonderful.
Yeah.
You can see it in whichever way pleases you most. And actually, it was really, when you were talking about Sri Chaitanya, I was just really inspired about his journey from a logician and someone who had written a book on logic to someone who became a real bhakta and a devotee to love. And it's so great because we see so many the more atheistic type in living in our world today. They would think that would always go in the opposite direction. But that someone might start off as uneducated and not really, an unintelligent, uneducated person might start off with this love and devotional feeling, but then over time they could train you to become more logical and rational.
Yeah.
And then you would finally end up becoming, a really wise, rational, atheistic person. But he showed
boring, serious adult. Exactly.
Yeah, it showed a complete disregard to their thinking, where he started off looking as deeply as he could, it seems, into the world of logic and reason, and then realized how limited that was, threw all of that away, and then flung himself into the language in the place of the heart, and really started living from a place where, and I mean, you want to think, like, if you were really a logical person, I mean, because we take logic to be this, the ideal way to come to the right decision. Like, okay, look at all the logical, what is it? Be logical here, be a rational person. And if you could find a way of living in the world that filled you with joy and happiness and meaning and purpose on a daily basis, wouldn't it be logical and rational? And if that was much more enjoyable than all of the alternatives, that seems to be the logical and rational thing to, okay, I'm going to choose to live my life as though this set of ideas is true. And especially we live in a universe where it's many would say it's impossible to prove or disprove any particular set of beliefs, whether you believe that there is a divine, whether you believe there's not a divine. It's wonderful that there's this wonderful curtain which all of these truths are hidden behind. And it's really not until we shuffle off the mortal plane that we can really prove for certain. So while we're here playing the game, it's like all of the things are hidden in some way, and we can feel them, we can glimpse them, but we can't prove them to anyone else. It's up to each individual has to choose the belief system that they see as the most logical or rational or meaningful.
Well, it'd be funny if we do go to heaven and we see it was logic all along. You guys are all mistaken. That'd be so funny.
Yeah, if choosing that way of life, because to me, many people are choosing a set of beliefs or a way to live in the world that is making them far more unhappy and far more miserable, and they make their life far less meaningful than some of the other competing sets of beliefs. And I think it's just a shame that people aren't more open at times to investigating some of the alternatives. And that's the thing, if you don't even see that you're not living out your unique personality, that you're simply acting out a set of conditioning and beliefs and ideas that's been handed down to you by your upbringing and your culture, and you just think, oh, well, that's who I am, this is who I am, and this is how the universe is. And so at least getting to that point where you're open to exploring and trying out some different sets of ideas to see which ones suit. And you'll pretty quickly find out that there's so many different ways of looking at the world. And there'll be some out there that will be so much more enjoyable for you. So if you are always questioning, like, oh, I don't know if this is true, or how will I ever know? It's like, live it out. Like, put it into practice in your life. Like, take God as a living reality, and like talk to him as though he's someone who can actually listen to you, and love him as though he's, a being that can receive your love, and try it for a month. And like, if you try that for a month, your life will be radically different at the end of that month. But it's like this, there's kind of a sense of fear that, like, but what if I do it? And what if I like it?
Yeah, exactly.
What would that mean?
I have to change my life. Oh my God.
What would that mean? What would that mean?
What if it really works? Yeah.
So
no, I mean, I recognize that fear myself, because I was an atheist in my teenage years. And then when I had this spiritual experience, I really felt a sense of fear. Oh my God, now do I have to now become a God believer? And, I will become that kind of person. And there's a kind of a prejudice that you have yourself in your own mind. But I totally agree. Just try it out. And if it makes you, the end result is always, how does it make you feel? Does it make you happy? Does it make you fulfilled? Those things work in the long term.
Because if we look at that journey, I'll just go back to this for one moment. If we look at that journey of love through to devotion, and then that becomes surrender, that's what we're really talking about here, is this willingness. Are you willing to surrender who you thought you were to who you actually truly are? And it's at some point that is the great game for all of us, is the letting go of what we thought we were and what we think we know, and allowing ourselves to melt into, or to dissolve. And I really like that idea that finding the solution, like the word solution has two radically different meanings. There's the solution as the answer that you're looking for, but a solution is also in chemistry when you dissolve a substance into a liquid. And in some way, those two things are the same thing. When we're really looking for the solution, the answer to something, we have to dissolve some part of ourselves that's stopping us experiencing the answer. There's some part of ourselves that's holding back. There's some part of ourselves that is resisting this new reality. And the final, true, deepest surrender is when we allow our limited small self, the identity, the ego, to completely dissolve into something far greater. It's the drop, letting go of the need to hold on to its individual identity and becoming the entire ocean. And that is the most wonderful, sweet thing. It's like the ultimate surrender is the full surrender of our ego and our limitation and our smallness to the vastness. And there will be a moment of fear when you get to that point. There will be.
Yeah.
And it's not something that comes easy, because there's that part of ourselves that's so deeply attached to this idea that we're this body, we're this form, we like the color purple, we don't like the color blue, we like lasagna, we don't like this. It's like all of these silly things that we get so attached to here in the human world, and through all of our lifetimes. But there will come a time for all of us. And there's a great saying in Buddhism that it's better to live out many small deaths before the final death. And if you can do that through your life, have many small deaths, let go of a lot of things along the way, realize that your attachment to this idea or your attachment to this way of doing things is not who you are. It's conditioning, it's programming, it's past lives, it's your karma, it's all of these things are keeping you stuck in who you thought you were. But none of those things are real. It's like we're all something far more interesting. It's something far more beautiful and transcendent than any of those attachments to character and name and fame. And letting go of those things actually becomes one of the most joyful things you can do each time. And it's wonderful if you can have some people in your life that are willing to poke you and to challenge you on things, because very often it's hard for you yourself to see where you're still caught, where you're still attached to things. And I think that's when you have really a beautiful, strong spiritual friendships. And I'm living with one of my spiritual brothers at the moment here, and he's a wonderful character because he loves debating and he loves pushing and poking and pushing and pulling at your so-called things that you think are real, things that you're attached to, things that you want to hold on to. And so we have some wonderful conversations where we're able to put things to the other person where, hey, did you ever think that maybe you're afraid of this thing, or maybe you're attached to this, or maybe you're fearing what will happen if you let go of this thing? And it becomes it becomes a real game there, as long as you can take it lightly. And that's a wonderful thing, to find someone where you can have that sort of relationship without it always becoming a battle of the ego, where there's not a
you feel safe. Exactly. There's love there and you feel safe. Yeah.
And so, so we have some wonderful times together. And
I know, because I was with you guys last week in Austria.
Yeah.
So, we played those games. We did a lot of those games there where we poked at each other and we pointed out things in each other, and it was all very lighthearted and joyful. It's fun.
Yeah. It's because the thing is that the life is absurd. It's completely absurd. And the fact that we're consciously aware of it. I mean, if I was just an animal, if I was just a wolf living out in the Siberian taiga, the epic forests out there in Siberia, just hunting with the pack, and that's all I knew. Okay, it's like I'm walking with God. I'm in tune with nature. I'm in tune with reality. And I just act out my natural behavior. And that's a beautiful thing. There's a beautiful sense of flow, and there's a beautiful sense of being at one with reality around us. But as soon as you become a human and you suddenly become aware that you're aware, and you can think about it on so many different levels, it becomes so absurd, the human game. And it is the next evolution. It is the next step for life here on Earth. And that's something so important for people to know, that human beings are not some sort of a plague here destroying the Earth. We are the next step of Earth experiencing itself. It's like Earth has created people, it's created human beings, so it can experience itself. This self-aware consciousness allows the universe to see itself through our own consciousness and our own eyes. And that's such a mind-boggling thing, that we can be part of this feedback of this universe experiencing itself through us, and the divine experiencing its creation through us on a daily basis, on a moment-to-moment basis. The divine is able to experience its own creation through us. And that's such a marvelous thing, but it is completely...
It's completely absurd, and it's completely deeply meaningful and beautiful at the same time. I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? It's like we're all God, and yet we're all imperfect human beings. And it's that unbelievable paradox that we live out every day that's just like makes it so absurd and so beautiful at the same time. Yeah, I love that. I love that idea. I love that idea of the solution, of the dissolving into a liquid. What would be the base of this liquid, though? That is something I really... Is it coffee? Is it not instant coffee, but is it like espresso brewed coffee?
No, but that's a really good question. But I think it's just pure consciousness itself, because we've talked in the past about how consciousness is fundamental. It's like there's been some wrong thinking with materialism that matter is fundamental, but now people are starting to realize that consciousness is actually fundamental. So there's like a substratum below everything. It's like a deep ocean of consciousness, and you could call that, that pure consciousness, the divine itself. But that's what we need to dissolve into. When we dissolve back into that, that's where we dissolve, and you see all these flakes and flecks of our humanness being dissolved and left behind. There's my idea that I like heroic adventures, and I don't like this thing, and you see those things will slowly start to dissolve and disappear into this ocean of consciousness.
Lovely. Hey, so I wanted to talk a little bit about also how to develop devotion, because we know
Yes.
now what devotion is, how important it is for our journey, but how do we develop it? Like, how do you bring it to the fore? Is it something we already have, or is it something we have to develop?
Well, I think it's we need love first of all. So we need to feel a sense of love for the creator and the creation. And as soon as you can feel love for the creator, you can feel love for the creation. And as soon as you can really love the creation, you can love the creator. So it doesn't really matter which direction you go, but if you find a direction, like some people might find that going through Mother Nature is a way that they can start to develop this love for the creation. Because when you see a beautiful scene, or you see, nature working and its amazing harmony and the beauty of it, you can feel some love for that. And then you start to feel, as you go deeper and deeper into that and you expand your love more and more, you can start to feel as though, there is something beyond this creation even, and that is the creator. And some people will find it easier to go the other pathway, where they want to see and feel that there is, first of all, a creator, and then they can, through loving him, they can start to love the creation. Because some people's life experiences have been so hard here on earth that it's understandable that they might have some frustration towards a creator. Like, why did you do this to me? Like, how did you put me in this situation? So you have to find a way that works for you, that you can find. But it always starts just with finding something you can love. Like, whatever it is. It might be, just the smile of a child, or it might be, your dog. Like, really, if you can love your dog, I think you can find God through your dog. And so I think you can
just switch it around. D-O-G, just switch it around. G-O-D.
So find something you can love, and then love that as much as you can. And then at some point, see if you can expand that. Like, okay, you can love your dog. Okay, now maybe try and love another dog. Love all the dogs in the world. Like, and from that, you can start to see how love can expand and expand and expand. And for a lot of people, that's really hard, because they haven't been shown, or if you haven't experienced love, like a loving childhood, a loving family life, it's very difficult, because you're always afraid, and you're protective, and you're afraid of exposing yourself and making yourself vulnerable. But start with the smallest thing you can love, and just expand that, expand and expand and expand, and you'll start to realize that there is no end to your love. And then when you can really love something, then you start to feel your devotion. Like, if we take the dog as an example, like when you really truly feel love for your dog, you suddenly start to feel this devotion to your dog. You want to serve your dog. You want to be there for your dog. You want to take it out and play with it. You want to give it walks. You want to give it treats. And I see that more than ever, that for a lot of people, their dog is their God. It's their way of approach, like their love that they have. It's like the people who now have fur babies, and instead of having a family, they've got a fur baby. But the love they're pouring into their dog, and the way they treat it, like, this is the love that if you expand that and expand that and expand that, and that devotion you have, this is the feeling that you can have for the entire universe. You don't need to have it just tied to your dog. You can love a lot more than your dog. And that's the thing to realize as well. Like, we think the universe is so vast. We think the universe is so unbelievably complex and vast, and just beyond the limits of our mind. But the only thing bigger than the universe is our hearts. Our spiritual hearts. Our spiritual hearts are actually large enough to hold the entire universe inside of it. And that's so mind-boggling to think that we actually have this ability to experience vastness inside of ourselves that is infinite. We can experience infinite vastness inside of ourselves. And that all comes from, the spiritual heart and the soul. And that is the place where love comes from as well. And if we can experience expansion and vastness, we can also experience love in the same way, because love is the fundamental energy and substrate of the universe as well. It's like the universe, if we took everything away, if we took away all of the matter, all that would be left was this. We would still have the experience of love if we could connect to the energy that was left behind. And so it is something vast, and we can expand and expand it and expand it. And the more we can expand it, more that we can experience it, naturally devotion flows from that. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't say we have to try and force devotion. And I think Sri Chinmoy has actually mentioned that as well. Like, forced devotion has no value. It's like, if you think that you need to force yourself to be devoted to the world or to the divine or to your path, it's like, don't bother. Like, don't waste our time. Like, we don't need that. Like, that's totally unnecessary, because it only has value when it's coming from that place of love. So start with love, expand that love until it naturally bursts forth into devotion in your life. It will naturally, you'll start to notice that you're starting to be devoted to your customers at work. Like, for your waffle shop, when you feel real divine love within you, naturally the way you treat your customers is radically different. They're no longer just a transaction. They're not just someone coming to give you some euros and you give them a waffle. It's like, wow, this is the divine coming to me in a different form, and I can serve this divine being that's in front of me. And you do it with this from a place of devotion and love, and they feel it. And then they want to come back. They want to experience that again and again. It becomes the most beautiful way to serve the world, is just simply coming from a place of love and devotion.
Beautiful. And I would also add, if you feel that love for the divine, the next step, what I would add to that is, you also have to feel that the divine loves you. And the divine loves you infinitely more than you can ever imagine. And then it becomes really a two-way kind of like relationship. You love the divine, but you also have to feel that you are loved by the divine. And this love is infinitely greater than you can ever imagine. So, and many people are afraid to feel that. Like, they can kind of get the idea of, okay, I can love God. But then the idea that God loves me, like with all my imperfections, with all my whatever, secrets I have and things that I hide from the world, and perhaps my small corruptions or my lies. And no, God sees you as another God, actually. And to allow that love to enter into you, that also brings about devotion. So it's both the love that you have for the divine, but also receiving the love from the divine. And I think it's more difficult, that step, but it's essential.
That is beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for adding that. That is exactly what we needed.
And so I wanted to end with a story. There's a spiritual story about the sage Narada. He was a well-known sage who lived in ancient India in the times of the Mahabharata and the old glorious Indian days of yore. And Narada was a well-known sage, and everybody really admired him and went to him for advice. And he was a devotee of Vishnu, so he had a lot of love and a lot of devotion. He composed songs. He sang, and he traveled around, and he was very revered. But there was a time when Narada lost his devotion, and so this story is the moment when he starts becoming angry with Vishnu, and he's kind of reasoning, I don't actually need Vishnu. He says, if Vishnu is in my heart, why would I worship him? Because he's there already. He's in my heart, so what is the need of worshiping him? And if he's not in my heart, then there's even less need to worship him, because he doesn't even exist. So he had a real moment of like existential doubt and anger towards Vishnu. And, his mind was kind of happy with this new realization that he could actually live without Vishnu. He didn't need Vishnu anymore. But then another part of him felt so miserable, and something inside him was just simply killing him. And he felt so miserable and unhappy. And then he went to Lord Shiva. And so in those days, you could just approach Lord Shiva. Narada had a free access. He went to Lord Shiva and he explained the situation. And he said, I lost I don't feel I need Vishnu anymore, but I feel so unhappy. And then Vishnu said, well, you fool, you lost your devotion. You need to develop devotion. And then Narada said, well, how can I develop devotion? And Shiva answered, he said, mix with people who have failed in life. Mix with the people who are full of sorrow. Mix with the people who feel that they cannot exist even for a second without Vishnu. Mix with the people who feel that without God, they're helpless, but with God, they're everything and have everything. So that was the advice that Shiva gave to Narada.
Wow.
And that is interesting, right? So he said, mix with people who have failed in life, mix with people who are full of sorrow, and mix with people who feel they cannot exist without the divine.
Yeah, those are three distinct groups of people.
Yeah, what do you make of that, though?
Yeah, I mean, there seems to be some deep and ancient wisdom there. So there's something about when you've suffered and failed that his will humble you in some particular way, and it will also show you, if you spend time around people like that, that very often they've created that reality for themselves. So you'll see that those people who've failed and are suffering, they perhaps are people who have denied God. They've tried to do everything themselves. These are other fellow people who've said, "Oh, I don't need the divine. I'll just do it myself." And then 10 years, 20 years later, they find themselves really at rock bottom. And so spending some time with people who've got to that point shows you where that path takes you, the path of denying the divine and denying the deeper realities of life. So that's the first place to go. Because if you want to, there's two things that are going to inspire you in life. There's someone showing you how good something can be, but there's also the fear of how bad something can be. And human beings, because we're sensitive to disaster and failure, if we actually see how bad something can get, that's actually a really strong motivator to move in the other direction. So there's some real wisdom to say, yeah, go see those guys, see how their life has gone for them. And then obviously coming back to people who are living in tune and walking with God, the contrast between those two groups of people would be so striking that I think that is a great set of instructions for anyone who is struggling with their devotion. This is the perfect antidote to your problem.
I love that explanation. I also have another one, because
yes,
there is this other story, we told it before in the podcast, of this spiritual master who, whenever he felt a loss of devotion or when he felt his consciousness was dropping, he would go outside, he would look for the most downtrodden person he could find, and he would throw himself at their feet. He would touch the feet of a homeless person or somebody who was completely downtrodden, failed in life, etc. And by doing that, he felt his humility coming back, and from his humility, his aspiration came back, his devotion came back. And I just read an aphorism by Sri Chinmoy the other day. He said, there's a secret way to reach the God heights. I have to touch the lowest man's filthiest feet. It's very dramatically worded.
That is very dramatic.
So it's like touching the feet of somebody like that. And that's a symbolic way of mixing with them and really seeing the divine in them. Brings you back immediately to your own aspiration.
Yeah.
But I love your explanation. I love that idea of mixing with the two groups, and then seeing basically you're seeing the end results of the two different strategies in life.
Yep, exactly, practical.
So we kind of reached the end of our podcast today, and has anything interesting been going on in your life since last time we talked? I mean, you're now in Berlin.
Yep, we're in Berlin. We're doing some training, preparing for the Berlin Marathon, which is in a few months' time, and everything is going very well with that. And we're preparing for a meditation retreat in New York, starting in a few weeks' time, to celebrate Sri Chinmoy's birthday.
We're all going next week on Monday. We'll see each other there.
Yep, so that's going to be fantastic.
And you ran a race this weekend, a 10K?
I did. I ran a 10-kilometer race, and it went very well. And it's Berlin City Night, it's called. It's the biggest 10K race in Germany. And I won my age group. So there was no one ahead of me who was younger than me. So I'm in the over 45 category now, and I was first place in the over 45s.
Yeah, and you broke 32. You broke 30 by 1 second?
By 1 second, I was ahead of another guy who was similar age. And yes, I ran 32 minutes something. So
yes, congrats. Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had a wonderful weekend myself with our spiritual community in the Netherlands. We had what we call a joy day. We had a little retreat and we meditated together. We did a boat trip together. We visited the beautiful town of Gouda, where we make the famous cheese. And we learned all about that.
You mean Gouda?
Oh, Gouda. Come on, don't give me your English Van Gogh Gouda stuff. Gouda is the way to pronounce it. And if people can pronounce it correctly, We'll give them a free trip. We give them some free cheese.
I love some Gouda cheese. Yeah, it's wonderful cheese.
Good old Gouda. All right. Well, with that said, we'll close it off for today. Thank you so much for listening and watching. And if you like our content, then why not give us a review in your favorite podcast app? It helps us with the algorithms, and we want to get this podcast out there to more people. So if you want to help us out with that, leave a review or leave a comment. We read all our comments. And if you have anything to ask us, like if you want us to talk about something, leave that in the comments, and we may do that as a podcast episode. So Vajan, thanks for today, and see you next week.
All right, see you then. All the best.